Many students are daunted by trying to analyze poetry. They're given a poem and asked to analyze it, and they don't know where to start, and they don't know what to do, and they freak out. So I want to give you a few key items in any poem to look for that will help you analyze what is going on in a very compressed piece of literature. Probably the most important thing to realize about a poem is that everything in that poem, from the title of the poem to even the punctuation, matters to the poet in his or her attempt to convey meaning. So I'm going to give you 9 elements to always consider when analyzing poetry, and then we will analyze a specific poem using those 9 elements to give you a feel for how this works. So, when you are presented with a poem, as you will be in this class, to write about, your job is to figure out 2 things. The first is what the poem is saying, and the second is how the poem goes about saying that. So, for our situation here, we're going to be specifically interested in the idea of happiness. What is a poem saying about happiness, or contentment, or discontentment being the flip sides of happiness? And then how is the poem doing it? So we are going to pay attention to these 9 elements. The punctuation of a poem, the title of a poem, any repetition that we see, repeated words, repeated phrases, repeated patterns, symbols, any object that is representing something else, word choices. Are there repetitions in word choices? Are the word choices, do they stand out to you in some way? Are they maybe an archaic or an older form of a word? Look up words you do not know when you're reading poetry, because those words, every single word matters, because the poem is such a compressed document. Figurative language, similes, metaphors, those are comparisons. Similes use the words like or as, so busy as a bee. That is a simile. A metaphor just makes a comparison without using like or as. Personification are human qualities given to non-human entities, objects, animals, anything like that. Are there any allusions? And this sort of goes into a word choice. Is there an allusion to something else, maybe mythology or something like that that we don't expect? If so, look up that allusion or that word that stands out to you that you don't really know what it means. That's important. Form. How does the poem look on the page? In other words, what is the rhyme scheme? Meaning, does every line, is there no rhyme? Is there rhyme with every other line? Is there rhyme with every 2 lines? What is the rhyme scheme? It's important to find that out, because if a poet establishes a particular rhyme scheme and then breaks that rhyme scheme, that's something to pay attention to. He or she is trying to emphasize something important by varying from the norm that's been established. Stanza pattern is the same way. Do you have, a quatrain and a quatrain, and then all of a sudden 6 lines? So that would be a 4-line stanza, a 4-line stanza, and then a 6-line stanza. Well, you should pay attention to that. Also, are there blank spaces? Has there been one stanza and then a space and then another one. I mean, how do those things look on the page? What's the tone of the poem? And the tone is just thinking about in terms of like tone of voice. How does the poem sound? How does the persona sound? So it's important to read poetry out loud so you can get a sense of what the tone of the poem is, the tone of voice. Is it angry? Is it frustrated? Is it delighted? You have to get a feel for that. And then the beginning versus the end. Has something changed throughout the course of the poem? Do we start one way and end another way? So all of these are elements that we need to think about when we are analyzing poetry. Because what you're trying to do is to see if the poet has established any patterns, and then if those patterns have been broken in any kind of way. Because that's what you need to pay attention to. Where has the poet deviated from a pattern he or she has established? So I think if you approach reading poetry in these 9 specific ways, that you'll learn a lot about how a poet puts together a poem, and you'll be able to tease out what the poem is saying about a particular subject and how that particular poem is saying it. So we will, if you'll move on to the next video, we will take these 9 elements and analyze our first poem for this class.